Allow me to introduce you to the story of Bernd Kai Meyer, a German software engineer and author. His abilities in software engineering allowed him to score a job as the senior software engineer for Raven Software in the mid-2000s until 2010. As of this video's recording, his LinkedIn profile shows that he currently works in R&D for a company called One Arrow LLC, though that may have changed since either the creation of his LinkedIn profile or since the creation of this video. But why am I telling you this? Why should you care about this Bernd Kai Meyer guy? You and I probably have a hard time pronouncing his name right, unless you're German, I suppose. Well, sometime around or after the summer of 1995, he approached id Software for a deal regarding publishing a book on Doom's source code. This was right around the time when the source code for Wolfenstein 3D was released. He was expecting a release of the Doom source code similar to that of Wolf 3D's, especially since the release of Quake was around the corner. Eventually. However, the people at id Software at the time were not interested in the book deal, so it was put on hold. The next year, Quake was released to critical acclaim, except for the people who thought it was just a reskinned version of Doom in 3D. Those guys didn't like it, but we don't talk about those guys too much nowadays, do we? Anyways, time passed on, and eventually John Carmack himself got in touch with Kai Meyer during the last weeks of 1996 to see if he was still interested in that book deal. He was! id Software was intending on sending him the source code to Doom, but the DOS version of the Doom source code used fragments of the DMX sound library, so releasing that to the public would cause too much legal complications. Instead, id Software sent him the source code to Linux Doom, which was a port of Doom to Linux based on version 1.9's code. This version had quite a number of bugs, especially with the sound system. Kai Meyer, being a software engineer, decided to clean up the code he was sent. He had big intentions for the source code too, even at one point planning on introducing an OpenGL-based rendering system to it. However, the book deal didn't turn out so great, as many publishers in 1997 thought Doom wasn't marketable anymore. As a result, Kai Meyer released his clean-up version of the Doom source code on December 23, 1997. Some of Kai Meyer's changes were present in this version of the code, some of which remains controversial even to this very day to source programmers. However, not even a full day later, the source code of this version was reported by a programmer named Chi Huang back to DOS, thus giving birth to the first ever unofficial source port, DOS Doom. DOS Doom was a senior branch of a vast majority of the source ports I've talked about in my previous videos, including Edge, which is actually its most direct successor. In 1998, months after the release of the source code, as well as DOS Doom, Team TNT went to work. Yes, that Team TNT. The team, which included the late Ty Hallerman and Jim Flynn, as well as other programmers like Lee Killough, who will make an appearance later on in this video, went on to create one of the most influential source ports in Doom's history, Boom. This source port doesn't need too much of an introduction. If DOS Doom is the granddaddy of most modern source ports, then Boom is the daddy. It introduced a ton of new features, most of which are displayed in BOOMEDIT.wad, which was created by the late Jim Flynn, which is being displayed right now. If you want to check it out yourself, I recommend booting up Boom or most of its derived source ports to see all the fancy features that many aspiring mappers ended up liking to use in their own maps. Boom was so popular that at one point there was even a planned merger of DOS Doom and Boom, which was to be called Ogre, Open Resource Gaming Engine. Ogre's proposals were to create a game engine framework based off of the Doom engine, and allow it to be heavily moddable. This project developed so much hype that it even got the attention of John Carmack himself. However, after a few months after the announcement of Ogre, the hype died down, and left behind a dead form with no announcements of progress to be made. A real shame to be sure, but at least there's still all of Boom's derived ports, whose features many will take for granted nowadays when making maps and WADs. Speaking of things we may take for granted nowadays, there's another source port that's considered a successor to Boom. Not very long after the release of Boom, Lee Killough released a port called Marine's Best Friend. Marine's Best Friend, or MBF for short, introduced even more fixes and features that Boom didn't. Friendly monsters, helper dogs, fixes for the block map limits, higher resolutions, methods to change the sky textures by means of line defs, and more compatibility for dehack shenanigans that allow modders to customize the way Doom's weapons and enemies work. There was even a WAD like BOOMEDIT which demonstrated its features, MBFEDIT.wad, and that's a WAD that's being displayed right now. MBF was the basis for another port, SMMU, or Smack My Marina, which was created by Simon Howard, known in the Doom community as Fraggle. SMMU had a very short development cycle, but featured quite a number of its own features on top of the foundations laid by MBF and Boom. Its work lives on through the Eternity engine. MBF also lives on through the work on the modern source port PRBoom Plus, though there have also been releases of MBF versions as late as 2014, including a port of MBF for Windows made in 2004 by Team Eternity. No promises that any of these versions will work on your system though. Now then, allow me to go back to an older one. On March 6, 1998, Marissa Height, also known as Randy, released the first version of Zdoom. Originally, Zdoom was a merging of the Linux Doom code with some other old Windows ports made at the time, including the controller functions from ATB Doom and parts of the code from NT Doom as well. However, as time passed and development moved forward, the port integrated other features from ports like Boom and whatnot. In one of my last videos I said that Zdoom was a derivative of Boom, but this isn't exactly the case. It is, however, completely Boom compatible, and one of the things that I had going for it was its nigh universal compatibility with WADs and other mods made in mind for most other source ports mentioned here. This is something that it can still boast about to an extent, with its inclusion of other Doom engine games in its code. Height's goal at the time was to make Zdoom a general 3D gaming engine. I'd say that goal was a success, since its derivatives have been used as a baseline engine for retail games. Speaking of Zdoom derivatives, I should probably do a little addendum to the Otomex and Z-Demon portions of my last video. Both of them are derived from older versions of Zdoom, and I wasn't able to give both of them a fair shake in my last video. So excuse me if I return back to my more subjective style of presentation for a bit. Z-Demon in particular has an integrated IRC client and its Z-Launcher client that allow you to chat with other players. Otomex also has an integrated link to its Discord server nowadays too, and upon playing it online with co-op, I can say the netcode on it is pretty good. Since it comes from an older version of Zdoom, it has a bit of a more vanilla style feel to it. This probably makes it one of the best multiplayer ports for the purest-minded player. Otomex is also particularly renowned for being used in QuakeCon tournaments too. Quite a good job there, Otomex. Sorry I didn't give you a true look in the previous video. Anyways, this is but a portion of the history of Doom's source ports. These historical ports will live on through their children and inspire the likes of coders, mappers, and gamers in general for years to come. This video was based upon an even more condensed version of an already condensed history of Doom source ports article written by James Haley, or Quasar, for Doom's 10th anniversary. Quasar himself is currently the lead of Team Eternity as of this video's recording. There are still plenty of source ports I can talk about for future videos, but I thought it would be a good opportunity to talk about where it all began, and some of the things we take for granted nowadays. That's all I have for you guys. If you liked the video, thumb it up, and if you want, you can support me with a coffee in the description. Never necessary, but always appreciated. Thanks for watching, and until next time, toodaloo.